Some of y'all been waiting a little bit too long to get ready for whatever may happen. Your gear should be ready, and you should be prepared to get it on or get out whenever the need calls for it. All right? Get it together. And be prepared for when there's no other choice. Stop waiting till the last minute. Have it together.
It's wartime. Nadia, Maharaka, Karatazaya, YAHAWASHI. Let's go. Let these boys know what time it is, huh?
Red ain't fire at the enemy, you feel me?
Let's go.
Brian is real.
Who are we?
All praise to MASHAYACH, YAHAWASHI.
Let's go.
We them bruised, we them bruised, boy, ready, aim, fire on the enemy. Yeah, I wish I said they remember me. We beat them bruised and we face the ease.
All praise to MASHAYACH, YAHAWASHI, you understand?
Ready, aim, fire on the enemy. Yeah, I wish I said they remember me. We beat them bruised and we face the ease. It's not the obvious, yeah, I'm about to go off. The water, YAHAWAH, yeah, I'm about to show off.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Barking out there being no helium for comedian. What have you done for me lately? What happens when you put in a cage fight a giant in with a midget? The use of the midget, the use of the M words. When you put a quarter in the pocket of a rich man, then there's a hole in that pocket and it trickles down. The quarter falls out into nickels and dimes. If you want to find out more about little people or abnormally small people or unusually small people, there's a website.
Hank Johnson is a U.S. representative of Georgia. Hank Johnson and I both graduated from the same law school. However, Hank and I do not share the same positions on the Second Amendment. I'm a two-way advocate who works to protect the Second Amendment. Hank Johnson is a two-way hater who is actively working to destroy the Second Amendment. Hank Johnson has filed H.R. 5717 titled the Gun Violence Prevention and Community Safety Act of 2020 in the U.S. House. As innocuous as the name sounds, calling this bill the Gun Violence Prevention and Community Safety Act is like calling Hitler's autobiography the beautiful struggle of a man who wants to save the world. This bill reads literally like a destroy the Second Amendment manifesto. Universal background checks and a 7-day waiting period that's basically a backdoor gun registration? Check. Banning the sale of firearms and ammunition to anyone under the age of 21, even though you can fight and die for your country, get married and forced to pay taxes at age 18? Check. Ban nearly every semi-automatic rifle in the country? Check. Ban standard capacity magazines? Check. Red flag laws that deprive you of your due process? Check. 30% tax on guns and 50% tax on ammo? Check. Safe storage requirements that make being able to use your gun in a self-defense situation so complicated that you might as well not have a gun? Check. Ban on suppressors that protect your hearing? Check. More gun-free zones that make it easy for mass shooters to kill a bunch of people unopposed? Another check. Ban on buying more than one gun a month? Another check. These lunatics literally aggregated every major anti-Second Amendment gun control law and put it in this bill. This is insane, but it gets worse. They want to make it illegal for anyone to not only buy a gun, but ammunition without a license from the government. Here's how you know these people are anti-Second Amendment. They want a national license to buy a gun, but when it comes to concealed carry, they don't want your concealed carry license to work in other states. What's even worse is what they require you to do to get the license. You have to be at least 21 years old, complete training in firearm safety that includes a written test to demonstrate knowledge of applicable firearm laws, a hands-on test that includes a firing test to demonstrate safe use of a firearm. Now, I can hear all of the fence sitters saying, well, that doesn't seem so bad. I actually think that's a great idea. Oh, really? Now ask yourself this question. How the hell are you supposed to take a live firearm test in order to buy a gun if you don't already have a gun? That's the whole point of this bill. It's not designed to take away guns tomorrow. It's designed to take guns away in a generation. If you don't already have a gun, you can't buy one under this bill as it is currently written. And even if you could, let's not forget the smorgasbord of other gun control laws in this Mein Kampf bill of eradicating the Second Amendment in one generation. They are using the chaos of the beer flu to push this thing through. And like I said before, as a Second Amendment advocate, we do not get to rest because we're trying to protect the castle and they're constantly trying to tear it down, brick by brick.
When did the Second Amendment stop being about a well-regulated militia and start being about individual gun ownership? And did you know that the answer has to do with the KKK, German socialists, and Al Capone? As one of the most hotly contested and vaguely worded sentences in history, the full text of the Second Amendment says, "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." So this intellectual crossword puzzle was added to the Bill of Rights by James Madison and his crew of anti-federalists. When they were ratified in 1791, the anti-federalists expressed nervousness about the newly formed federal government gaining too much power over the states or becoming tyrannical. So the language of the Second Amendment was geared towards curbing the central government's power over individual political dissenters. But today, the Second Amendment and gun control debate is framed almost exclusively around the right to bear arms, without too much discussion of well-regulated militias, and there's a reason for that. Because even though the story of gun rights and gun legislation is often debated in the court of public opinion, when it comes to questions of constitutional interpretation, there's really only one court that reigns supreme, and that's, well, the Supreme Court. So for this episode, I'm going to trace the 5 major rulings made by the Supreme Court on the Second Amendment. Case 1, United States versus Cruikshank. Well, it took a while before the highest court in the land heard a case on the Second Amendment, 1876 to be precise, and that first case actually involved the KKK and states' rights in the wake of the Civil War. After the conclusion of the Civil War, the newly reunited nation was in the midst of Reconstruction when they passed the 1870 Enforcement Act, which was designed to prevent mobs run by private citizens and groups like the KKK from blocking newly freed black citizens' access to constitutional rights, which seems like a good law. But in 1873, a mob of white residents who were sometimes collaborators of the KKK and would later go on to form a terrorist group called the White League in 1874 murdered an estimated 100 African Americans who had occupied the Colfax, Louisiana State House. 3 of the members of the mob were convicted of violating the 1870 Enforcement Act under the charge that they had prevented black citizens from assembling peacefully, exercising their right to vote, and that they had curtailed black citizens' Second Amendment rights to bear arms. However, the court ruled that the Second Amendment was only designed to stop the federal government from infringing on citizens' right to own arms, as a safeguard against potential tyranny. Therefore, state governments and other private citizens couldn't be charged with taking someone else's right to bear arms away. But the question of the militia and what defines a well-regulated militia actually lasted through the next 2 Supreme Court rulings on the Second Amendment, and that brings us to case 2. Presser versus Illinois. Herman Presser was part of an armed citizen militia of workers in Cook County, Illinois that had ties to the Socialist Labor Party, and he led a group of several hundred armed citizens through the streets in protest in 1879 and was found guilty of violating Illinois' state laws about who could organize a militia. Essentially, the law stated that unless you were a member of an already recognized volunteer militia of the state of Illinois, the federal government, or had special recognition from the governor, then you could not organize an independent militia. And Presser disagreed, stating that the Second Amendment protected his group's right to organize a militia to protect themselves from tyranny. But the Supreme Court disagreed, saying that while the federal government could not limit well-regulated militias, the state government could. So armed militias were allowed, but only if the state agreed to it. But that wasn't the last we'd heard of the Second Amendment, because the dawn of the 20th century brought us even more debate about how and why someone would organize a militia and what kinds of weapons were necessary in these efforts. And the surprising culprit behind this new twist was none other than Al Capone and the mysterious Valentine's Day Massacre of 1929. Case 3, United States versus Miller. Okay, so we're back in Illinois, specifically Chicago, on February 14th, 1929, when 7 criminal associates of mobster George Bugs Moran were gunned down in a garage. And although most people suspected the infamous Al Capone was behind the hit job, no one was ever brought to trial for the murders, which have now become something of American historical folklore mixed with a heavy amount of conspiracy theory. But the Valentine's Day Massacre and similar crimes like it began to shift the cultural conversations around gun ownership more towards what kind of guns it was reasonable for a private citizen who is unaffiliated with any type of law enforcement or military to carry. But the militia debate was still a big part. In 1934, the federal government passed the National Firearms Act, which imposed taxes and restrictions, including new registration laws, on certain kinds of guns like machine guns and sawed-off shotguns. And the ambition here was not only to impose new taxes, but also to limit the use and spread of guns that were frequently used in the commission of gang crimes, like the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. So, back to the Supreme Court. A man named Jack Miller and another man were found guilty under the current version of the National Firearms Act of carrying an unregistered sawed-off shotgun across state lines, which was one of the restricted weapons. And when his case, United States versus Miller, reached the Supreme Court in 1939, the court stuck by the legality of the National Firearms Act, noting that in the absence of any evidence tending to show that possession or use of a sawed-off shotgun has some reasonable relationship to the preservation or efficiency of a well-regulated militia, we cannot say that the Second Amendment guarantees the right to keep and bear such an instrument, thus reinforcing the federal government's ability to regulate particular types of guns. Okay, so 3 out of the 5 Supreme Court rulings on the question of the Second Amendment focused on states' rights versus federal rights and the organization of militias. But when did we start to see the current interpretation of the law as just the right to bear arms? And how did the shift from a well-regulated militia to arguments about individual self-defense occur? Well, the National Firearms Act proved to be pretty contentious. It required that people transferring as well as those who were already in possession of restricted firearms had to pay taxes on the gun and also report those weapons to the government. As a result, the Treasury Department could give information to state governments about people who registered their restricted or banned weapons, and those people could be prosecuted under state laws. So in the 1968 Haynes case, the Supreme Court found that this regulation violated gun owners' protection from self-incrimination under the Fifth Amendment, and as a result, the 1934 Act became virtually unenforceable. We also have to add the NRA into this story, because in 1977, the National Rifle Association experienced a huge shift in their political agenda. Prior to the 1977 convention, known as the Revolt at Cincinnati, the NRA's agenda in the mid-20th century focused heavily on hunting, conservation, and marksmanship. But the new contingent that took over that year's convention was invested in transforming the agenda to center squarely on individual gun ownership and a narrower interpretation of the Second Amendment. From this point forward, the group gains traction as a guns rights lobby organization and moves from a relatively bipartisan hobbyist group to a political powerhouse that makes individual interpretations of the Second Amendment as a key part of its agenda. So we're just up to our final 2 Supreme Court rulings on the Second Amendment from 2008 and 2010, and these ones absolutely 100% have to do with an individual's right to gun ownership, but they're less way back history and more current headlines, and both of these decisions mark a pretty big shift from the court's previous rulings on the matter. The 2008 ruling in District of Columbia versus Heller found that restrictive gun regulations in the District of Columbia were an infringement on an individual citizen's rights to bear arms for the purposes of lawful self-defense, even outside of any well-regulated militia. And a similar decision in 2010's McDonald versus Chicago found that Second Amendment rights could not or should not be limited by state governments, since Chicago had enacted gun regulations that prevented many, if not most, private citizens from purchasing handguns. These 2 recent decisions focused heavily on the individual right to bear arms and less on the well-regulated militia. So, how does it all add up? Well, even though Heller in 2008 and McDonald in 2010 represent the current status of rulings on the Second Amendment, the fact that they center individual gun ownership for the purposes of self-defense and not the regulation of militias could stem from a couple of different avenues. The first is that after the Civil War, the National Guard took up the mantle of state protection, making militias less central to interpretations of the Second Amendment. The second is that around the 1920s and 1930s, we started to see an increase in discussion not only of what makes a well-regulated militia, but also what kinds of guns should or shouldn't be protected under the Second Amendment. But these rulings all focused on stopping the federal government from limiting the Second Amendment and heavily favored the states. However, although Heller did determine that the right to lawful individual gun ownership was protected under this current interpretation of the Second Amendment, the late Justice Antonin Scalia did note that the right to self-defense and individual gun ownership under the Second Amendment is not unlimited. So whichever side you believe is correct, it looks like this debate will continue to rage on. So what do you think? Anything to add to our timeline on interpretations of the Second Amendment and the well-regulated militia? Drop them below with all of your citations on local history, the Brady Bill, and variations in state laws, and we'll see you next week. I had fun last week hanging out with Vanessa from Braincraft, but before we get to that, I wanted to let you know about the new PBS Digital Studios series, America from Scratch. It asks big questions about how we would remake America if we started over today. They ask fun questions like, should 12-year-olds be allowed to vote? What if there were no states? And do we even need a president? There's a link in the description so you can check it out. Okay, so on to whether or not breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Tony Vasile on YouTube said he enjoyed the crossover, so speaking for Team Danessa, which is what I've renamed us, I say thanks, Tony. We enjoyed collaborating on this one. Julie Wiley on Facebook enjoyed the food puns, which makes me feel quite proud since she's also a dietitian. Mission accomplished, and thanks for writing, Julie. And the Ponzer Will Die on YouTube, a viewer with a sharp mind and a bit of a morbid username, asked if we could do an episode on how and when drinking coffee in the morning became normalized and what the effects of caffeine are on our bodies. That's another good area for a collaboration, so if there are any nutritionists or folks on YouTube who are good with biology and anatomy, hint hint Johansson, then hit us up, and we'd love to answer more crossover questions. So keep those comments coming, and we'll see you next week.
Hey everybody, how's it going? And welcome to Daily's 2A News. Today we're going to talk about the worst gun control bill that I've ever seen introduced into Congress that would essentially ban pretty much all semi-automatic firearms, including some bolt action. So let's go ahead and talk about H.R. 5717. Okay, so H.R. 5717, this is easily one of the worst and most extensive gun control bills that I have ever seen. I mean, if you want to read this entire bill, you're going to have to close yourself off from everybody else, get a cup of coffee, sit on the couch, and pretty much block out an entire day, because it's like reading all of the Harry Potter novels back to back. It's that long. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go ahead and read the titles of each one of the sections. That'll give you a basic understanding of what they're trying to accomplish here, and then we'll get into a little bit more detail. So let's go ahead and start off by reading the titles of each section, which gives you kind of an idea of what that section's about. You know what? Actually, let's do something else first. Since this bill is so bad, this bill is so all-encompassing, it would put so many people in line for prison, it would ban so many standard and commonly owned firearms, that let's go ahead and start off first by calling out the tyrants that are responsible for this. Because here we are in the middle of a national emergency, and here they are trying to push through gun control. So the people that we've put in charge to basically protect our safety are trying to strip us of our Second Amendment rights during a national emergency. So let's go ahead and call them out by name first, and then we'll get into the bill. So we start off with Mr. Johnson of Georgia for himself, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Quigley, Mr. Brown of Maryland, Mr. Morrell, Mr. Delarno, Mrs. Carolyn B. Maloney of New York, Mr. Keating, Mr. Lynch, Mr. Moulton, Miss Presley, Mrs. Trahan, Mr. McGovern, Mr. Danny K. Davis of Illinois, Mr. Neal, Miss Clark of Massachusetts, and Mr. Pascal. Those are the people that are in the House right now trying to take your Second Amendment rights away during an emergency, and that needs to be called out. Those people need to be absolutely removed. So let's go ahead and get into it. So Title 1, we have firearm licensing. Section 101, license to own a firearm and ammunition. That's right, you're going to need a license. License that's going to be need to be renewed every 10 years. So yes, you will need a license to purchase a firearm in the future if this passes. This also, Title 1 starts by talking about state firearm licensing as well. You have Title II, background check reform, universal background checks, completion of background checks, and a 7-day waiting period, reporting of background check denials. So basically there's going to be a universal background checks, 7-day waiting period, and they also want to report all of the denials to Congress because Congress needs that information apparently. Title III, firearms possession. 301, protecting victims of domestic violence, fugitives from justice, minimum age for purchasing firearms and ammunition. That's going to go along with the firearms licensing. So you have to meet a specific age and requirements in order to get that license. Secure gun storage by owners. So again, they're going to be instituting what they consider to be safe storage of your firearm. And this is going to be on a national level. And then gun-free school zones. They want to expand gun-free school zones, not only to just public schools, but they want to add language that would expand that to private schools and stuff like that. So Title IV, extreme risk protection orders. Extreme risk protection orders, grant program, so they want money to study things. Federal extreme risk protection orders, so basically making it national instead of just statewide. Federal firearms prohibition, so people that violate those risk protection orders are basically going to lose their Second Amendment rights. Identification records. We have conforming amendment, and then full faith and credit. So we have that. That's going to be Title IV. And this continues to go. I know this is going to get really boring for you guys, but again, I'm breaking this down. If you were to sit there, it would take hours upon hours to actually read this entire thing. So this is the breakdown. But we have Title V, assault weapons and firearms, silencers, and mufflers ban. Give me a break. So Section 511 is just going to be the definitions. They have the restrictions on weapons and large capacity ammunition feeding devices. So essentially they want to ban, in this section, they want to ban most or almost all semi-automatic centerfire firearms. That includes pistols and long guns, shotguns, and things of that nature. So they want to ban those. There is a grandfather clause that they have in here, but essentially anything that requires a magazine and is semi-automatic is going to be banned under this bill. So the use of grants, again, grants for buyback programs for assault weapons and large capacity ammunition feeding devices. So basically the government's going to be using the money that you already paid them to do these buybacks for something that they never owned in the first place. So again, I don't understand how you can buy it back, but they want your tax dollars to go to fund that. Ban on untraceable and undetectable firearms. So this is where they're going to be going after those 80%. They want to ban the 80% as well. So there's going to be a ban on those and a prohibition on possession of certain firearm accessories. So now they're going to be banning firearm accessories as well. Subtitle B is the firearm silencers and muffler ban, where they have restrictions on firearm silencers, which is basically going to be a ban on all silencers, suppressors, and so forth. And then talks about the penalties and the effective date for that, which I believe is going to be 1 year after the bill's passage. We have Section 6, which is firearm trafficking, prohibition against multiple firearm sales and purchases. So this is where you get into that whole firearms rationing thing. So like 1 gun a month and stuff like that, which California has implemented, which Virginia was looking at as well. Increased penalties for making knowingly false statements in connection with firearms. Retention of records. That's another one. So retention of records, that's so they can keep track of who's buying these things. And if you have to retain records on this stuff, they can easily pull up your name, and that is no good. So firearms trafficking. And then it goes on to Title VII. So we're still going here. This is all in one bill, mind you, if you're still watching, which I would commend you if you are, but wouldn't mind if you didn't because I know it's long. But gun shop security measures, inspections, employee background check, gun store thefts, civil enforcement, no effect on state laws governing dealing in firearms, lost and stolen reporting requirements. So now they're going to give you a time limit, depending on how long you reported it lost or stolen. Let's see, report on implementation, enhanced record keeping requirements. Again, National Registry, right? Deadline for issuance of final regulations, and then repeal. Now we're moving on to Title VIII. Title VIII is repeal of the exclusion of pistols, revolvers, and other firearms from the consumer product safety laws. So you guys know how a lot of people from, you know, these recent tragedies have gone after firearms manufacturers for lawsuits, right? But they're protected because, you know, how do they know what somebody's going to do with it? And they simply sell it for its legal purpose, and then if somebody uses it illegally, people want them to be held liable for that, and they shouldn't be held liable for that because it's not their fault, right? But for some reason, they want to add all these different things to say that, yeah, we're going to go ahead and remove these, so you guys go ahead, have a good time, file as many lawsuits as you want, because that's what we need in our country right now. Increase the excise taxes relating to firearms. So excise taxes is also something that they recently did in California, where basically you have the price of something, then you have the sales tax, and then they add on another excise tax on top of that. So they increase the fees on something so that something that might cost you $200 is going to cost you $400 once you actually walk out the door. And then we have the last title here, which is Title 10, Miscellaneous, and that is servability. I'm not sure exactly what that means because I didn't read Section 10, to be totally honest with you. So again, let's go ahead and talk about that now in more details, that you guys have an idea of what the titles are and so what each section of this bill actually covers. So let me go ahead and break this down now that we've read that as simply as possible. Basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to ban semi-automatic firearms, commonly owned firearms, pistols, shotguns, handguns, rifles, stuff like that. They're trying to ban anything that's basically semi-automatic. The language that is in this bill basically leaves open the door for anything that is essentially bolt action. But even on bolt actions, there's certain features that would throw it into the banned category. So they're considering handguards that are not part of a stock. So you know, if you have a simple bolt action rifle, a simple hunting rifle, right? It's got the stock. The stock is actually part of the grip and part of the fore end itself, and that helps you hold it and protects you from burning your hand. Well, they're considering anything that is even partially enclosed part of their ban. So they would call that a barrel straddle. That's one of the accessories that would essentially be banned. Now, as part of a hunting rifle, since it's part of the stock, that wouldn't be banned. However, there are bolt action rifles out there these days. Obviously, there's modern improvements. Things continue to get better. And so you have companies like MDT out there who are making these, you know, chassis systems that have an independent stock. They have the chassis, and then they have a fore end that would include a handguard, and it's a fully encompassing handguard that would protect you from the heat of that barrel, right? Still a bolt action, same as the one that has the stock that just, you know, is one piece stock, but because the handguard is separate from the stock itself and not one piece, that bolt action would now be considered an assault weapon under this bill. So you can see that not only does it go after semi-automatics and, you know, all the stuff that we're used to trying to fight for, but it also goes after certain bolt action shotguns and things like that. Anything that would have something on there like that would essentially be banned. So we're talking about 10 round capacity. We're talking about anything with a magazine feeding device that it can accept anything higher than 10 rounds, belts and so forth. But they also threw in there anything that could be coupled together. So right now in California, a lot of people try and get around things, or not necessarily get around things, because you do have to remove the magazine and reinsert it, but still they try and get around things by taking two 10-round magazines, having a coupler in the center that would allow you to remove the magazine and put it back in. According to the vague language in this bill, those types of devices would also become illegal because it would essentially help you load 10 more rounds much quicker. And so again, not only are they going after all these semi-automatics and even bolt actions and stuff like that, they're going after the magazines as well. But really, this bill just stops to me. I mean, it's a bad bill altogether, but this bill stops to me in Title I. You don't have to read any further because Title I implements licensing for firearms. So if you have a Second Amendment right, and that right requires a license, is it a right anymore, or is it a privilege? If the government has to grant you a license in order to use a right, it basically nullifies that right and it now becomes a privilege, and that's exactly what's going on here. So to me, this bill is dead in Title I, which makes you get a license. That license has to be renewed in 10 years. It requires that you go through a background check. It requires that you be of a certain age. It requires a few different things. Obviously, you're going to have to pay a fee, right? But you have to show safe handling. You have to show that you know how to use it. You have to show all these different things before even picking up your firearm in order to get one of these licenses. So it is really just, to me, dead in the water. Title I, this thing's done. Now, like I said before, this is kind of an all-encompassing bill. So it is basically everything that we've been trying to fight against in one bill. They have red flag laws written into this. So they have what they're calling extreme risk protection orders. They want that to be on a national level. They want a national registry. I mean, you guys read that in the titles as well. They want a national registry. They want people to keep files, to keep documents for much longer. They want reporting done to Congress to know who's buying, who's selling, who's been denied, and so forth. They want to be able to keep track of people. That's a national registry. So you have gun bans, ammo bans, age restrictions, red flag laws, national registry, all of these types of things, including gun-free zones, which we all know is a huge mistake and just makes a soft target. But you have all of these rolled up into H.R. 5717. All of these things are wrapped up into one bill. Not to mention safe storage laws. So in California, they have safe storage laws. You have to keep everything locked up and separate and all this type of, all this stuff. And it has to, the storage unit that you're using to store your stuff has to be approved by the government. So it can't just be any type of storage that you want to keep something in. It has to be approved storage by the California government. And again, this bill wants to put that on a national level so that you would actually have to spend more money and buy things to keep things in. And those storage containers that you would keep them in have to be approved by the federal government. So it is all encompassing and the worst bill that I have probably ever seen. On a national level, this just would not fly. This would be the end of things, okay? I know you hear the word tyrant being thrown around a lot, but essentially that's what these people are who are trying to pass this. They're tyrants. They want the government to have all the control and the people to have none. What's interesting about this bill is that it has space written in there for the government. So it basically says this is not going to apply to the federal government. It's not going to apply to state government. It's not going to apply to law enforcement. Basically, all these people that work for the government are going to be excluded from any of the legislation that's in this bill. So all of this stuff is going to be excluded to them. And interestingly enough, it even exempts previous law enforcement. So retired law enforcement is going to be excluded as well. So this is definitely one of those bills where you need to start bugging people. And I mean bugging people big time. You need to make phone calls. You need to write letters. You need to email. You need to join the groups that are going to be fighting against this type of stuff. So Gun Owners of America, the Firearms Policy Coalition, which I'll link down below. All these people are going to have to fight against this should something like this actually go through. But we need to get in there with our preemptive measures and let them know if you want to stay in office, which I don't suggest that they do anyway because they are clearly tyrants, but if you want to stay in office, you're not going to pass this stuff. I don't want it to go past the House. I want it to be voted down in the House and be done with it. And let these people know that the American people are not going to stand for it. Especially in this day and age with what's happening right now across the country and across the world. This is what you're focusing on. This is what you're putting your time towards. How dare you? There are people out there that are hurting right now and they need the support of the federal government, not the federal government to come in and simply strip their rights away. That's what you guys are doing. You guys are the lowest of low, the dirtiest of dirt, and you need to be taken out of office. Anyway, I want to thank you guys very much for watching. Again, if you guys want to read this, I will link this bill down below so you can read it for yourself, but it is just tyranny incarnate. So go ahead and check it out if you have about 8 or 9 hours of your time. Thank you all again very much for watching. Please hit that subscribe button and the little bell notification that's next to it. Have a great day.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric and Chad here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today we've got another Gun Gripe episode for you. And all right, there's all this coronavirus stuff going on, and we've tried to make a really good effort to pull this thing together. We've been trying to kind of self-isolate a little bit, but we came together because we feel like it's really important to talk about H.R. 5717. It's one of the most far-reaching gun bills that's been introduced in a long time. FPC is calling this a gun apocalypse, okay? An encyclopedia of gun laws rolled into one horrible, horrible gun law. And this was introduced by Rep. Hank Johnson here out of Georgia, oddly enough. And the bill has, I want to say, about 14 or 15 Democrat co-sponsors all around. And this is very, very far-reaching. We are going to dive into this. And I feel like it's really important to make the distinction before we start talking about this bill and how bad it is. Look, guys, I know there's a lot of people that are home. Y'all are out of work. It's scary right now. I know some people are worried and they're in really hotbed areas with the coronavirus and things that are going on. And I feel like it's really important to make the distinction that when society is at its worst point, okay, when people are scared, when stuff is going on, that's when this legislation gets introduced, is when they see an opportunity to take advantage of a tragedy or take advantage of a disaster or a situation and turn it into something they can politicize and get their goals. So that tells you right there that they don't care about the safety of the people. All they care about is politicizing a tragedy and trying to come up with a way to get more power. And that's what's really scary about this bill. So let's go into it a little bit.
One thing, too, about the introduction of this bill at this time, I mean, gun sales are very, very high right now. Gun sales and ammunition sales are up. People are realizing, hey, you know, I haven't had a gun for self-defense. This is scary. I need something to defend myself with. A lot of people are realizing what the true intent of the Second Amendment really is now, and they're getting off their laurels and putting their partisan politics and their feelings to the side and saying, I need something to defend myself that's better than law enforcement, who says, like right now, there's a lot of jurisdictions where law enforcement aren't enforcing like petty theft and such because they've got better things to do, technically, you know?
Right.
So it's just funny. It's ironic to me that a bill like this would be introduced when more people are buying guns and realizing, hey, this is what the Second Amendment stands for, but also maybe people aren't paying attention to what's going on outside of the coronavirus right now.
Well, what does that tell you about these Democrats and what they know and really know about their constituents, right? Okay, so there's all these anti-gunners who previously were like, you know, trying to pass anti-gun laws and do all this, and these people are lining up outside of gun stores to get a firearm to protect themselves and protect their families because they realize, you know what, at the end of the day, I'm responsible for protecting my family.
Yep.
The police aren't going to show up if somebody loots my store. The police aren't going to show up if somebody breaks in my house and steals my TV.
Yep.
They understand. They're finally starting to understand that the law enforcement does not have a duty to protect you. They don't have an obligation to protect you. Now, there are a lot of good policemen out there that, yeah, of course they're going to protect you if they can. Just like there's plenty of citizens carrying guns that will protect you if they can. Lots of good people risk their life to save you if you were in trouble, right? And people are realizing that this can't be a political issue. This is an issue of rights and human dignity and preservation of liberty. And those things transcend the barriers of politics. And I think people are starting to see that now. We've got a lot of new gun owners now. As soon as this video's done and we're done making this video, I'm going to make a video on gun safety. Okay, I've never done videos like that, but we're going to make a video to try to help some of these new gun owners that are out there. So be looking out for that. So let's get into what this bill covers or anything else.
Yeah, just real quick. About the police not having an obligation to protect you, there actually is a Supreme Court case dated back in 1989 that Colin and Noor shared the other day. DeShaney versus Winnebago, the court held that the failure by the government workers to protect someone, in this case a 4-year-old boy, from physical violence or harm from another person, in this case his father, did not breach any substantive constitutional duty.
Right.
So they do not have a constitutional obligation to protect you. You are responsible for yourself. So anyways, let's
I
get into
seriously do think that the reason these people push so hard for anti-gun legislation, they want guns to be hard to get. They don't want you to protect yourself. That's the core value, is that they want you to have to rely on government or feel like you have to rely on government. It actually creates a snowball effect, okay? So by more people being disarmed, then more people get hurt, killed, raped, involved in crimes, right? No matter what that crime might be, they become victims of crimes because they are conditioned to think that protecting themselves is somehow not the right option for them to have to do, right?
Yeah.
But then what happens is it creates a snowball effect of crime, and then they go, well, see, what we did isn't working, so we need more, and only the criminals are going to have guns, and then they're going to be able to go, oh, police state, socialism, like that's what they want.
Yep.
The bare bones reasons for this is power. It's a power grab, okay? So we're going to dive into this. This is a terrible bill, and before we even get into anything, it's important that you guys know, okay? Look, I know a lot of folks are out of work, and it's scary. And look, I know some of you guys are truck drivers, nurses. Y'all are out there, putting in the work, and y'all are at risk, and we really appreciate that, okay? I know a lot of you are probably got more overtime than you're ever going to know what to do with because of this. And I know some of you are out of work and suffering, and we feel for you guys. And I'm sorry. I mean, I wish there was something better, but take that as an opportunity. If you're one of the people that's at home and you're mad right now about this being submitted, it's a perfect time to contact your reps. Okay? If these guys are going to go through the effort to put this bill in and try to strip you of your rights, then we need to come together as a community and we've got to squash this thing, right? We need everybody talking about it. We need everybody contacting the reps. We need everybody breaking out the pitchforks and the torches. Okay, there's no better time to do it. We've got to squash this thing right now. And we cannot allow the Democrats to use this bill as a bargaining chip on that, what do they call it?
Coronavirus relief.
Yeah, the relief. Okay, yeah, the relief package that they're putting together for coronavirus. It was recently shot down. Okay, they're like, oh, we have some concessions. So now Pelosi's trying to say, oh, well, if you don't put $10,000 of debt forgiveness for student aid in this package for every person that has student loans, we're not going to pass it. Well, what does the Coronavirus Relief Act have to do with student aid? So see, they're trying to bargain. They're trying to use your safety and your health against you. They're using that money that people need as a bargaining chip. And I guarantee you that 5717 or something like it, or any other far-reaching amount of other things they want, are going to be used as or try to use as a bargaining chip. So don't just tell your representatives to oppose 5717. You need to tell them that Americans want the relief package because they need it, and not to let the Democrats play political pool with your relief. They are withholding that, knowing that they can use it to hold over your head to get something else snuck in that they want.
That's
dangerous.
It's called earmarks. Ooh, they're dangerous. All right, so
let's get into this. But look, guys, we're with you, okay? Yep. We're all in this together. We're going to get through this, okay? Let's talk about it.
All right, so this is from Firearms Policy Coalition. All right, so H.R.5717 would create a national gun registry, ban almost all semi-automatic firearms, institute a federal magazine ban, implement national red flag laws, tax guns at 30% and ammo at 50%. Ban patriots under 21 from exercising their Second Amendment rights. Ration guns by making it illegal to purchase more than one firearm in a 30-day period. Force safe storage requirements on gun owners. Ban home builds. Ban suppressors. Force FFLs to spend massive amounts of money to comply with the new security requirements. Expand gun-free zones. Yeah, because that's really worked in the past. And more than we could possibly list here in this space.
It is a far-reaching gun bill, okay? Dude, and it's horrible. And they're basically trying to squash 2A culture in one generation.
Yep.
I mean, this is so infringing. I mean, to me, the Second Amendment is the most clear language in the Constitution. Shall not be infringed, okay? That's a very, very clear language, okay? So I don't understand why, when something happens, they just want to come out and infringe on it. And there's all these gun laws that are already on the books, and there's all these things going on, and the left is lining up out of gun store doors to buy firearms to protect themselves because they realize, hey, this ain't political. I got to protect myself, right? So if there's Democrats that own guns, there's Republicans that own guns, and now there's Republicans that support gun control. I'm definitely not going to say they're not out there. There's rhinos out there, whatever, but if it is in fact, and this is not political pandering or trying to push, this side versus that side, because we try not to do that, but if it is in fact a list of Democrats, because it is, okay? I mean, I can't change that fact. The fact is this bill was introduced by Democrats, okay? So if it's Democrats that are introducing all this legislation, and if you are said Democrat that votes for it, said Democrats, you probably want to get on the phone and tell these people you disagree. It's okay to be a Democrat and be a gun owner, okay? I guess the way you would look at it, at least for me, is like, okay, social Democrat, fiscal Republican. There's lots of people that are sort of in that type of area, right? They believe in gay marriage, they believe in whatever, all of these things. They may be atheists, or they may not, there may be any other number of social reasons that they're a Democrat, but maybe they understand fiscal responsibility and they want to control big government and spending. Look, no matter what camp you're in, I don't care, okay? This thing is way bigger than a political party. It's way bigger than a single person. This is a generational seizing of liberty. That and they're not going to ask, are you Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, are you independent? They don't care what your political motivations might be. That's irrelevant, okay? They want your guns. That's the bottom line. They want the power. And they don't care.
So check this out. All right, so here's something else. I was kind of browsing through this last night, and this is something that I found pretty interesting. In Title 8, Industry Reform, Section 802, Repeal of Exclusion of Pistols, Revolvers, and Other Firearms from Consumer Safety Product Laws. All right, so if you guys aren't familiar with consumer safety product laws, it's like products that are considered like hazardous, okay, are banned. Okay, so you go over here to the consumer safety product laws themselves, consumer product safety rule. The term consumer product safety rule means a consumer product safety standard described in section 2056A of this title or rule under this chapter, declaring a consumer safety product banned hazardous product.
Right.
So that's how you'd get around like a handgun ban is basically just including them in a consumer safety hazardous product list.
Right.
Okay. So that's how they get around that kind of crap.
Yeah. So as far-reaching as all this other language is, and as bad as all this other language is, if they say, "Oh well, you know, the Consumer Product Safety Commission says that this gun is too dangerous to sell, therefore it's banned completely. Like you just can't sell it. We're going to tell the manufacturer you can't make it anymore." That's pretty scary.
License to own firearms and ammunition.
And not only that, but then that also gets into like lawsuits and liability. They want to open up gun companies to be sued when, you know, there's a tragedy or something happens. I mean, it's just scary.
Yeah, because that was
going to bankrupt the gun industry.
Lawful Traffic in Arms Act, or I can't remember what it was called. But anyways, basically, if somebody uses a firearm product to commit a crime, you know, the victim can't come after the firearms manufacturer. It's the same thing that happens in the auto industry. I mean, if, like we said before, okay, if a drunk driver takes a Honda Civic and plows through a crowd of people, or, you know, gets in a head-on collision with somebody else, the victim's family can't sue Honda for that person's actions. I mean, that is definitely a slippery slope and a bad day right there for everybody. And it's for not just the gun industry, but for every industry.
105 people die in vehicle collisions every day. Okay, so if we said, oh, well, if your family member got killed in a car wreck today, you need to call and sue the crap out of the car company. There wouldn't be any car companies.
Yep.
They wouldn't be able to afford to stay in business because 100 people die every day. Now, I'm not saying that guns don't hurt people. Yes, they do. But it's people that hurt people. The gun is merely a tool, okay? You can't blame a tool for the will of the person, right? That's crazy. That's the same as saying, all right, well, all these 100 people that die every single day in car wrecks, you get to sue the crap out of auto manufacturers. So what happens when there's no more cars to drive because the car plants can't stay in business because they're getting sued out of existence? They want that to be able to occur with gun companies. You know, something happens, they get sued out of existence. Oh, well, one less company to sell guns. So see, they want to cripple the entire industry with this bill. This bill is a crippling blow to your rights, to the firearms industry, and to good human decency. It goes completely against all the good things that make America what it is. You know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to do so in whatever means that you deem necessary, and to use whatever tools necessary to accomplish the task.
Yep. So with
this, and the cops are not responsible for your safety. So that tells you everything right there.
So the big thing with this bill is it's being introduced in a time where people are frightened and they're concerned for their safety. They're buying guns at an unprecedented rate and buying ammunition at an unprecedented rate. They're buying firearms that this bill would ban because they are the best tools for the job. They're the best tools to defend yourself and your family and your community ultimately with, okay?
Yep.
So for a representative to introduce a bill like this is just the ultimate kind of FU to the common people and the the largest amount of elitism that you can possibly imagine crammed into one person. I mean, how dare you think that you are better than everyone else, that you're going to take away everyone's right to own a firearm to defend themselves with, especially when the cops aren't coming to help you. I mean, we've already seen it, like I said earlier in the video, that, you know, petty theft and other minor crimes are not going to be processed right now at all. The cops are not going to respond to those calls. So
the guy that introduced this bill is the same guy that said that if you put too many troops on Guam, it's going to flip over in the ocean.
Oh, God. That guy, dude.
That's this guy.
Oh, God. That's him?
Yes.
Oh, Lord. That guy's an idiot. Dude. Well,
this is scary, but look, guys, don't panic. We the people will persevere. We always will. Contact your reps. Tell them that our rights are not a bargaining chip. Tell them that you don't appreciate a tragedy being politicized for a statist agenda.
Yep.
Tell them that you don't appreciate your rights being used as a bargaining tool to block aid and prevent aid from getting to the American people who desperately need it right now. Only the worst parts of your society and the best parts of your society get pushed out during a pandemic, during a disaster, during a hurricane, whatever. Look at all the confiscations during Katrina. Now, we won't get into that. Now, they got sued over that crap and they quit doing it. But until they got sued, they're like, take them because reasons, right?
Wasn't it the mayor of New Orleans just recently
it was,
that wanted to institute that again? Like, basically banning firearm sales in New Orleans?
Now, that's a different talk. But these tragedies, whether they be man-made or not, bring out the best and worst of our society. Okay? The best of our society, okay, here in Georgia. All right, let's compare Mr. Hank Johnson here to another upstanding company in Georgia. Chick-fil-A made an announcement, said if you're hungry and you can't afford a sandwich, you just go to Chick-fil-A and they'll give you a free sandwich. So, wait a minute. Brings out the best and the worst in society. So you got a company saying, if you're hungry, our company's not going to stand for you going hungry and starving. We're not going to let our citizens starve. We'll give you a free sandwich. Okay? So Chick-fil-A is going to give you a free sandwich. All right? So that brings out the best of society. All right? All these nurses putting themselves at risk every day, fighting to try to save people, right? Without the proper N95 protective masks and other PPE that they need to protect themselves and their families that they come in contact with every day. So it brings out the best in society. The scientists that are working their butts off every single day to fight this evil, invisible bastard. Okay? It brings out the worst in society because then you have snakes in the grass like Hank Johnson who go, oh, I see an opportunity to bite someone on the leg as they walk by. It brings out the best and the worst. This is the worst. It's not political. It doesn't matter if you're left, right. I don't care if you're socialist, communist, or if you're whatever. Okay? None of that matters at this point. You are an American citizen. Okay? I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, what side of the fence you're on, none of that matters to me. LGBT, if you're in that community, I support you, right? We're all Americans here. We've all got a common goal, and that's to survive and take care of our families. And those goals transcend political barriers. These people are trying to set us back. We've taken 5 steps forward as a society. They want us to take 20 steps back. This will put American culture back an entire generation or more. All the hard gains that people like Chad and I have fought for over the last 12, 13 years on this YouTube channel will be for nothing if we don't fight this thing and squash it before it has a chance to grow. The best and worst of your society. Throughout this whole thing, you remember who the best and the worst are. And you support the good people moving forward. And the bad people, put them by the wayside.
Indeed. Nothing else needs to be said.
That's pretty scary. So, look, guys, contact your reps. Do it for me. If you don't do anything else, look, I know a lot of people are home. Please, contact your reps. Let them know that you oppose 5717. Thank you, guys. Look, America will persevere. We will, okay? Don't let this thing get to you. But don't sit on the sidelines. Fight this. Don't assume it won't go anywhere. Don't assume it won't be used as a bargaining tool. Have a good one, guys. We'll see you next time. Many more videos on the way. And we're working our butts off here, okay? So we'll see you soon.
See you guys.
everybody? This is KD. Look, I've been seeing all these cool challenges. Push-up challenge, awesome. Book challenge, even better. Even the push-up challenge. We're going to be talking about that today. So I want to present a challenge. The mag-up challenge. 10 magazines for your primary and secondary firearm in these quarantine times. So here we go. All right, we have one. You can see it's loaded. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Secondary. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you know what? There we go. So look, I challenge Hank Strange, Coleon New War, Ken Scott, Argo J, Iraq Veteran 8888, Mr. Guns and Gear, Follow Through Buck, Black Rambo, HTX Tactical, Trill Toya, Hustle Queen, Corinne Mosier, the Military Arms Channel.
I'm an E37 Special Forces sniper from the Eiffel Tower. I can hit your iris, show you just what you need to know. Like Moses said, let my people go. The living comes with purpose, all of our callers were urgent. We the people that been beat up by the heathens. Pretty soon we get in the lead with the feet up. Living a life of luxury, white Gentiles. Marking is ugly, now it's just to be struggling. No mobile juggling. You can go get the bucket and carry your 5 miles on your head from a waterbed. You human hyenas been the meanest that we don't see. Eyes of the sun, tradional, some mama sees us. All of the lilies, y'all living in sweet dust. But it starts with us. Warriors in the army.